Essay 51, Dogma and Dynamics. Dogma has pervaded physics for over 300 years, a prime example being Newtonian dynamics. The inverse square law was discovered by Robert Hooke, and this was known in the 17th century. John Aubrey relates this in Brief Lives, a literary classic. Hooke sent Newton a letter containing a problem to which Hooke already had the answer. In contemporary terms, it asked Newton to give Hooke the force law that produces an ellipse. Newton answered incorrectly. He thought it was an inverse R law, where R is the distance from the Sun to a planet. The orbit was thought at that time to be an ellipse from the work of Kepler. Hooke pointed out to Newton that he knew the answer, an inverse square law. Therefore, the discoverer of the inverse square law is Robert Hooke. The dogma of the physicists attributes the discovery to Newton, and this is not historical fact. Of the three laws of motion attributed to Newton, only one was actually inferred by him, the third law, action and reaction are equal and opposite. The first law is an unproven assertion that objects move in straight lines unless acted upon by a force, and the second law is a definition. Force is defined as mass multiplied by linear acceleration. The third law is action and reaction are equal and opposite, the law of conservation of momentum, but in the Principia, Newton does not state it in that way. These are still known in the dogma as the three laws of Newton. Hooke and Newton were much influenced by Kepler's planetary laws, so they were interested in explaining orbits. It is almost always claimed dogmatically that Newton explained orbits with his inverse square law. As a matter of fact, he did not. His inverse square law is due to Robert Hooke. As a byproduct of UFT 196 AIS.US, its section 3 shows that the idea of an orbit being a balance of the inverse square law on a centrifugal force of repulsion is incorrect in a way. In section 3 of that paper, the elliptical orbit is expressed in terms of cylindrical polar coordinates, and simply by differentiation, the force law is found to be purely an inverse square law of attraction only, meaning that force acts only in a line joining the planet to the Sun. The centrifugal term appears but as a sum of two terms, one positive and one negative. The Leibniz law of 1788 is a rearrangement of these terms. The negative and positive centrifugal accelerations cancel out exactly, leaving only a force of attraction. In the dogma that passes for Newtonian dynamics, the actual method used is to construct a Hamiltonian for motion in a plane. The Hamiltonian is the sum of the kinetic energy T and potential energy U. The angular part of the kinetic energy is labelled by dogmatists as the centrifugal potential energy. This is despite the fact that it is a kinetic energy. It actually comes from the nature of the plane polar coordinates itself. This angular kinetic term is incorrectly described by the dogmatists as a potential energy that is added to the gravitational potential energy of attraction U. The result is claimed by the dogmatists to be the effective potential V. When differentiated with respect to R, the negative of the result gives two forces. One is the real force of attraction, which is negative valued, and the other is a false force of repulsion, known as the centrifugal force. It is actually the rotational motion of the plane polar coordinates. This appellation is pure nonsense, but it has been repeated endlessly and dogmatically, so there is tremendous confusion about the nature of the centrifugal force. There is only one real force in Newtonian dynamics or inertial dynamics, and that's the linear force. In Principia, Newton was aware of the Huygens centrifugal force, but no more than that. He certainly didn't derive it. However, it can be derived directly from the orbit, as in section 3 of 196. The orbit exists by astronomy, and the object M remains in orbit around the attracting object M. Therefore, the force as defined by Newton, mass multiplied by acceleration, cannot be an orbital force of attraction. It is merely a mathematical re-expression of the function that describes the orbit. The analytical dependence of R on the angle theta of the cylindrical polar system. The force of attraction does not explain why the object remains in orbit. A complete explanation needs Lagrangian dynamics, and this is used in various papers. Furthermore, there is no universal force of attraction. The same analysis for a precessing ellipse gives the sum of an inverse square and inverse cube term, and the same analysis for a circular orbit gives an inverse cube term. There is no universal law of gravitation, and it was not discovered by Newton. Historians and scholars must reject the dogma of the physicists. The explanation of the repulsive force that tends to throw an object outwards must be sought elsewhere, and it is given by ECE Dynamics in a paper such as UFT 55, and in many treatments and papers since this essay was written. The origin of the Coriolis analysis is given in UFT 55, which extends general relativity to rotational motion.